Hey there, this is Christopher German coming to you for Coffee with the Candidates, a product of the Sunshine News. We have an incredible interview today. We've been doing this all week long, Coffee with the Candidates, and it's a chance for us to really talk to the candidates. The forums, you're going to get a minute to talk to them. You're not really going to hear the whole story. You'll probably hear canned answers as well. So the idea behind this is to really talk to people and get to know them and to really explore who the person is behind the candidate and really get in depth, because you have to make the decision. It's coming up in May, as primaries right around the corner, just about a month and a half away. And we have to make a critical decision for this county, not just for the sheriff, but also for the commissioners. We've got a lot of big decisions to make. And then in November, we've got a president to elect. We've got all kinds of big things going on. So it's a hotbed of political activity here in Klamath Falls, and we have to make some big decisions coming up. So I want to get you the most information that you could possibly get. So without further ado, please let me introduce you to candidate for sheriff, Ryan Kaber. Ryan, how are you today?
Good, Chris, thanks.
Hey, we last time we talked, it was still early on in the campaign. We didn't have 9 candidates running for sheriff. We didn't have a lot of things going on. So what's new? What's happening in the world of running the race for sheriff?
Well, we're doing well, and there's a lot of encouragement, and it comes with a handful of discouragement. Overall, though, we feel very supported, and we're looking forward to see what the results of our labor will be third week in May.
Indeed. Do you think you'll get 50 plus 1, or you're going to have to go to the long haul until November? What do you think's going to happen?
It's certainly possible, though. I mean, it doesn't seem logical by our standards with that many candidates in there. But if the Lord tarries, somebody can get 50 plus 1 and end this thing in May. Well, I don't know. You just simply don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, do you? Well, so some people are just meeting you for this interview, I presume. Let's do a quick rundown of what's your acumen, where did you come from? Tell us a little bit about the man behind the sheriff candidate.
Yeah, certainly. So I was born and raised here. So I'm a son of Klamath. I love Klamath County, and found a home here and chose to raise my family here. I was raised to serve, and I found an ability to do that and continue to make this the community where I want to raise my family by serving through the sheriff's office. And the opportunity came up after 15 going on 16 years at the sheriff's office that I believe I have a vision to take us from where we are to where we need to be, and that the men and women who are extremely resilient will help fulfill that mission and vision. And so I ran for sheriff.
Well, that was a very, very succinct answer, much more so than the last time we talked. I think you've done a lot of planning since the time we last talked. But we've had some big changes that have happened since then. The Measure 110 is now not law anymore, and we have drugs that are now illegal again. That's going to definitely change the job for sheriff. We've got the perennial issue of funding cuts. Derek DeGroot said that we're running out of money as a county because we don't have enough revenues coming in to pay for all the services. So that's going to be another challenge for the sheriff. What do you think, what's the sheriff's office going to look like if you get the nod and they decide to put you in helm? What's going to happen with all of these big issues that are coming down?
Well, I don't think that the problem, the thinking that got us into the problems that we're into today can't be the same sort of thinking that's going to get us out of those problems. I don't believe that we're shackled by unsolvable problems. When Robert Kennedy was the Attorney General for the United States, he's quoted as saying that society gets the type of law enforcement they deserve, but what is equally true is they get the type of law enforcement they're willing to pay for. This is an expensive business. We are pulling from the general fund, like many other departments and agencies within Klamath County, but we're the 24/7, 365 agency, and so the number looks very large. I agree that we have had 6,000 or so people move into Klamath County over the last couple years, where other communities have seen a decrease. We've seen the increase, but the tax rate is what the tax rate is, and I don't know that we can ask people with inflation where it's at to raise it to a certain level. There needs to be a time when we've proven that we're providing the product that they deserve, that we probably need to seek some sort of dedicated funding so that we don't wind up with this road fund debate and where we're going to come up with the money.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see what the people are willing to pay for. And, to your point with the things like 110, yeah, September 1st, we get to roll some of that back, and it will take time to heal. I saw candidate Nichols and his deal. He thought it might take a decade. I hope it doesn't take that long. But I'm happy to see that that get repealed a little bit. I'm anxious for the new and renewed mission at Kingsley Field. I'm anxious for the prosecutorial DA, and with some of these teeth, that's why I've said, as I spoke about before, I have hope for where we're headed as a county and as a community, but we're going to be asked to make some decisions like you alluded to in your opening and who we put in those leadership roles, and that's going to very much determine what we see in the future, if we see anything at all.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up the population increase, because that's going to be a whole nother issue that's happening here. With more people, with more laws to enforce, with Measure 110 and drowning out drug addiction in this county, with all the different people that are going to be coming back in here because of F-35s that are going to be arriving, we're going to see some growth. What are we going to do to augment the sheriff's department to be able to accommodate that growth and to be able to prepare for a future?
Well, the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer of the county, and I see it as simply as the Board of Commissioners' responsibility is to provide for the protection of the citizens of Klamath County, from Lapine all the way down to the California border and all points east and west. And you have incorporated cities within the county who have an opportunity to provide their own law enforcement, Klamath Falls Police Department, obviously, and then we know our Merrills and Malins and so forth. But when they petition the sheriff, when they ask him on a request for proposal on what can you provide us, and he says, well, if I'm going to give you 24/7, 365 patrol coverage throughout the entire county, it's going to cost, X. And if the answer is, well, we can't afford X, what do we get for Y? And you say, well, I can give you 20 hours of coverage with some on-call, but we still have to meet the mandated search and rescue and running the jail. Again, to the statement from Robert Kennedy earlier, it's what are we willing to pay for? We got to find it's not necessarily the responsibility of the sheriff, it is the responsibility of the community, but first we got to find a place to house all these people. If the community is going to grow, where are we going to put them?
Right.
And when we put them in these places, are we talking about in the city of Klamath Falls? As far as law enforcement is concerned, that's covered. Is it going to be in the urban growth boundary, and is that new location going to be annexed in by the city? Again, it'll be the city's responsibility to provide those services. But even though you live in the city, you still utilize the sheriff's office's services, whether you recognize it or not, the tending to the courts and the runnings of the jail and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see where people choose to live once they move into Klamath County, how we're going to house them, and then what type of services they're going to need and how we're going to provide that.
Well, on a positive side to that, though, more people and more businesses and more development in this county means there's going to be more sources for revenue, which means that could be easier. It could be easier. We don't know, but we hope it could be easier. So there is a positive to all this growth around here. So we can't just say stay out of Klamath County because we don't want to grow. We need it to grow if we're going to keep growing as a community, right?
Well, yeah, I echo the sentiments of others. I don't want to be Bend, and I don't want to be Medford. I love Klamath Falls, Klamath County for where it's at, because as long as you're willing to drive 4 to 5 hours, I can be in San Francisco or Reno or the desert. I can be on the coast. I can go to Portland, but I don't have to pay those taxes and deal with that traffic, and I can come back.
That's one of the reasons why it's growing too, is because it is an attractive place that is more affordable, and keeping that affordability while still doing what it needs to do, that's going to be the challenge for the future, isn't it?
It is, but the secret's getting out.
Yeah.
And as that happens, there are services that you expect when you move into a community, fire, police, and medical, and those services, you expect them, and we need to make sure that we're in a position to provide them, which is why I believe that the Sheriff's Office is much closer to being the type of agency that the citizens deserve than it is by the descriptors that are given by others.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm in this.
Well, then talk to me a little bit about funding. There's the idea of grant funding, and I came from back east, obviously, and there was a militarization of the police departments back east. I mean, everybody got tons of money in the wake of 9/11, and they got tanks, and they got SWAT vehicles, and all this amazing stuff in all these urban departments. It seems like Klamath County kind of missed that boat with getting a bunch of somewhat militarization, but there is still opportunities to get a lot of grant funding for the sheriff. And I think, personally, from having a bunch of conversations with the sheriff candidates, one of the things we need to do is we need to put the fundraising hat on the sheriff, and he's going to have to be the person that is the face for that funding to get that funding into the community. What do you think about all that?
Well, I'm not going to kiss a gift horse in the mouth. Right? So if there's an opportunity to seek some funding that alleviates a lot of those other concerns, absolutely. But those are time-consuming matters, and grant writing is not easy. That's why there's jobs specifically for that in a lot of government entities. There are people that are hired to be grant writers, and we utilize some grants. Body armor costs a lot of money, and so there are grants through the Department of Justice in order to help with that. And I think we do continue to go and get those grants. The sheriff, that should be a function. The sheriff is a politician, whether he likes it or not, he or she likes it or not. They are a politician. But when we're fighting a war on so many fronts, that there's no time to go out and do those things. Yeah. To shake the hands and kiss the babies and go to the coffee shops and be the face of the agency and get yourself out there. That's what's lacking. Mm-hmm. And so, we get some of these things taken care of. We pursue those matters. But I don't know that we have somebody in the department that you can pull away from their primary function and give them another second. Everybody at the office has some sort of secondary or tertiary responsibility, and some people are in the quads and better on the things that they're doing. So to take them from their primary mission, that would be difficult. We're going to probably need somebody dedicated solely to seeking that sort of funding.
Well, I'm sure you have an answer for this, but one of the questions that I have to ask is talking about being inside the department. You come from a place which is really close to the department, obviously. You grew up inside that department in a lot of ways. What do you say to your candidacy being the inside man of the sheriff's office?
Inside man. Well, all the candidates have some sort of experience within the sheriff's office.
Yeah.
I think where you're going with that is because of my connection with Sheriff Kaber, and then the length of time that I've spent there.
Well, also because your breadth of knowledge. I mean, I think you have a encyclopedic knowledge of what's happening in the department right now, and it's not all negative, it's not all positive. It's a mixture of both things here. But the idea that you know that department from inside out in a way I don't think the other candidates quite have the same kind of vernacular is something that could be a liability, but could also be a big positive as well, couldn't it?
Well, there's a lot of things that I think I know, and if you are of the firm belief that you know it inside and out, then you could begin to shut your mind off to learning new things. Mm-hmm. I also know that I know that I don't know some things. There's aspects of how a jail runs and that job that I don't know that, mm-hmm. And so even though the sheriff is the CEO of the organization and sets the tone as the leader, there are people that you have to put in these positions and be able to trust them as they bring you as accurate of information as you can possibly get. So there's a time when you go to some place and you ask a bunch of questions of people and try and learn what their job tasks are, but you kind of already know the answers. And then there's a much better way to do it, which is true inquisitiveness and going and asking people because you really don't know and you're seeking to be taught, and that's really where I'm at. Okay. So what I knew about, I don't know, say running detectives, which I was honored to do for 3 years, but I've stepped away from it now for a little over a year. To think that I could step back into that, you might liken it to a quarterback that retires from the NFL and after a year sitting on the bench decides he's going to just jump right back in the NFL.
I can think of a lot of quarterbacks that did it quite nicely, though. So.
Yeah. So, I hope to be able to, it would be nice to be that guy in that particular role. But I also understand that they didn't get there without hitting the books and getting ready. Yeah. So, I know some ins and outs, but I also know that I don't know everything.
Okay. Well, then what's the rest of this campaign season look like? What's your plan for getting out there and getting the hearts and minds of these people to vote for you?
Well, here we are to the sprint phase, from September up until about now, depending on when you chose to file. It's been a little bit of a marathon, but we're down to the home stretch. And then I guess you're going to figure out whether or not you're one of the top two.
And then we're going to bonus time.
Or whether you get free baseball, as they say. Yeah. So what's really exciting now is that the best way to get the message out is through my own voice. You can type as much as you want and put as many pictures up there and have a glorious website, but now we get to talk. Mm-hmm. And so there's you and I today, and tomorrow I'm speaking in front of another group, and every day, or every week from now, basically until early May, we're in front of people and we're speaking and making it approachable and getting the message out. And so for the rest of the campaign, that's what this is just getting out the message, answering the questions.
Well, I dare say you've had the ear of a lot of different voters. What are you hearing from the voters about the sheriff's race? What are your takeaways from what people have been saying?
Well, I don't have as open as I've tried to make myself with access to my own phone number or to an email or come and see me at the meet and greets. I get a lot of drive-by shootings by the form of, by way of keyboard warriors. Mm-hmm. And so that is, that's not what I'm seeking. That doesn't create dialogue. You don't get a lot of, I get probably the same questions that you would expect to get. Some of them are the ones that you've posed here. How are you going to do this? What's your plan for how to solve retention issues, or how are you going to do that? And I hear the same things from voters that I guess you would expect to hear. How are we going to fix this? Is it as broken as people say that it is? And whether or not I've won any of them over, or they won't vote for me on May 21st, but if their candidate isn't there after May 21st and I am, maybe I've earned their vote. So I have to look at it that way and answer their questions and recognize that my message may not be the one that the majority wants.
So it's a game of attrition at this point, and whoever's standing after May 27th or 21st, whatever day it is, they're the ones that are going to be the person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's a scary concept. I don't like that very much. Well, one other question I'm asking all the sheriffs, all the sheriff candidates anyway, is Chiloquin. I'm pretty sure that you caught my Bates interview, and that interview was a horrible interview. It was one of my better interviews, but it was absolutely horrible to do because a family lost a son, a brother, an uncle. I mean, he was shot on his front porch. Mm-hmm. That unfortunately was an isolated incident in Chiloquin. 700 people in that town. We've had people go missing from that town due to drugs and alcohol and abuse. We've had the gentleman that wandered through town with a shotgun last year. We had the brothers that shot the brother that shot his other brother. There's a lot of violence for a very tiny little community. It's my personal belief that needs to be a priority for the future. We need to figure out what's going on in Chiloquin. If it means having a dedicated resident deputy to the area, I don't know. But something's going to have to be done because that community is hurting. It's a hurting community. And it's small, and it's got one of the worst crime rates in the entire state, which is utterly abysmal. How do we fix that?
What does Chiloquin want, I guess is the question back. Mm-hmm. Do they want law enforcement on every corner? And to the bigger question, does a cop on every corner stop crime? I don't believe that it does. I think that I believe that it's much like the water displacement theory. If you put your foot into a puddle, did you get rid of the water, or did you simply displace it? Mm-hmm. You displaced it. And so if I can put a cop on every corner, if there's a deputy at every location, well, there's no crime at that corner, and that pushed the potential crime to the next corner, and you push to the next one, right? Yeah. So can I say, well, let's get enough deputies throughout the county that we've displaced crime so much that it's now Lake County, Jackson County, and Deschutes County's problem? Okay, that would be fine, but nobody could afford to do that. So the question is, what does Chiloquin want? Yeah, there's a lot of violent crime that occurs up there. There's a lot of unsolved crime that occurs up there, and much of the crime issue and holding people accountable and the type of justice that is needed, either distributive or retributive type justice, is predicated on the community's willingness to help us solve those crimes. Mm-hmm. So I, like other deputies, have been first on scene to the murders or to the homicides. I've also been first on scene to people stabbed who tell me that they fell on the knife, and you think, wow, 3 times? That's amazing. They have to want us to help them. And it's the same when it comes to trying to prevent suicide. I can't help you if you won't let me help you. Mm-hmm. And so I just push the question back to Chiloquin. What do you want?
Well, perhaps it's not just a measure of we need to stop crime in that area. Maybe it's a measure of more social justice for that area. Maybe maybe it's education. Maybe it's social work. Maybe it's drug abuse treatment. It's a myriad of issues there. I'm asking you because you're going to be on the front line of all that kinds of stuff, and probably I think because you've already been there so many times, you know better than anybody else what is the biggest problems in that community and what would be the best solutions for that community. And I'm kind of thinking it's a social justice issue, not necessarily a crime issue. But you tell me, what do you think?
Well, I was fortunate in my Coast Guard career. I lived and worked on a reservation. The Coast Guard was guests there. We rented a space and utilized the harbor. And I watched it change a couple different times with the city council. The one thing that I've always admired about the tribes is their access to the respect that they have within the tribe. Mm-hmm. Right? They respect their elders, and they respect one another. You know, there's a lot of family infighting. It was the same there. It's the same here. I'm probably not the deputy that I send there that responds and just the facts, ma'am. You know, the old dragnet. Mm-hmm. that isn't going to garner the respect. So the social programs and stuff that needs to come from the tribe. That isn't necessarily a sheriff's office function. I can give them resident deputies, but true connection and true trust is fostered when you live and work amongst the people that you're there to protect and serve. Mm-hmm. Chiloquin is working on getting their own law enforcement agency going. The sheriff's office has been supportive of that, and that is where you will probably begin to see the turn of the tide. With that is if they get their own department and the council is telling them how they're working together for the type of law enforcement they want, and that builds that trust. But I also don't think that the stigma on Chiloquin is fair, because it is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful locations in all of Klamath County, and I'd argue the entire state. And there's a small group of people that create this poor reputation for the whole of Chiloquin, and that is just not the case. There is more good people that live within the city limits of Chiloquin, and certainly outside. As you get towards Modoc Point Road and you move out towards Sprague River, there are more good people than there are bad people. And if you did a deep dive into many of these violent crimes that you've discussed, you'd find out that many of the same names appear in multiple reports.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know better than I, but we're running up against time here, and that brings me to my final question, mm-hmm. which is, what do you, if people wanted to get involved in your candidacy, if people wanted to get behind you and make sure that you got across the finish line, mm-hmm. what do they need to do?
The best way is to go to the socials, Facebook or Instagram, the website, kaberforsheriff.org, and everything's listed there. One of the things I do on the website, which is I thought it would be helpful, and it's proved to be extremely helpful, is a lot of these frequently asked questions, 24-hour coverage, the concerns about nepotism and how we wound up in these particular situations. I saw fit to write them out in my own words, mm-hmm. and put them out there. So please come find me on the website, look me up on the socials, send me a message. If it's a cup of coffee, I will never not attend something that I have the time to go and attend, because that's what I plan to do if I'm the sheriff, because that is the fostering of the trust. Let's meet with the groups, let's talk, let's ask them face to face, let's not hide behind emails and letters, and let's go meet. And please come join me on this campaign of hope.
Well, hope is the name of the game, isn't
Yes.
it? Well, sir, let me shake your hand. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you guys for being here today. This is the important conversations we have to have, folks. We have to talk to these people. We have to understand what the future looks like around here, and we have to be able to understand the people that are going to lead us into that future. But what I am doing is I'm trying to educate the public about these things, because this needs to be talked about. For the Sunshine News, this is Coffee with the Candidates from the Waffle Hut, home of the Smash Burger. Folks, I thank you for being here today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. I'm Christopher German. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.